After the rise of the Islamic State, during the times of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in the later periods including the Age of Andalusia and the Ottomans, we have considered the oldest historical mosques in more than 12 Arab and European countries. In order to see the landmarks of those time periods and the Islamic conquest that are associated with them, and the role that they played in spreading the civilization of Islam, which the Arabs are carrying forward with every passing generation. And so, the mosques we cover in this series have many historical stories since they were founded. The mosques in this series have stories that have to be told and cannot be forgotten. Their stories are a living embodiment of the age of Islamic Renaissance. They are part of Islamic history. They are the oldest and most important mosques in the world. Mosques with a vibrant history. With God's permission, they were built to last. This is the city of Cordoba, the most important city of Andalusia and the most famous city in the world during the era of Andalusia flourished. It was the capital of the Emirate and then the capital of the Umayyad Caliphate in those lands. It was a center of science, knowledge, arts and literature in Europe for 5 centuries. It witnessed a revival that was unrivaled in any city in the world during those times, concerning its architecture and its walls that repelled the ambitions of invaders. These were innovations that were unknown to the cities of Europe during this period.
Andalusian architecture is open to the skies and the heavens. It isn't self-enclosed or covered. There are no fences or barriers which separate the palaces and the structures from the sky. Such that sunlight can enter the yard. Andalusian palaces, houses, and structures, such as schools and other buildings, were open to the skies in the center, because people used to raise their heads to the heavens, praising the name of Allah, saying, Allahu Akbar. And they would be able to see the stars, the moon, and the planets in the sky. And so Muslims could praise and thank God from the center of their yard.
The gem of Cordoba, its axis and center of science, the apex of Andalusian art and its architecture, and also Islamic architecture in general, is the city's great mosque. Time has been helpless to erase its memory, subvert its features, or damage its artistic elements. Despite the changes in its identity and function, To this day, 13 years after its foundation were laid, we are still amazed by the great Mosque of Cordoba.
Andalusian architecture managed to bring together architectural creativity and exquisite planning, coupled with a noticeable and recognizable spiritual element which impresses these sites upon those who see it with undeniable magnificence.
This mosque is located in the southeastern part of the city of Cordoba, near the Great River Valley. It is surrounded by narrow walkways.
The Mosque of Cordoba has a unique interior space. It developed over the different time periods, beginning with the age of the first ruler Al-Mansur. These different components remained faithful to the first typology established by Al-Mansur when the mosque was built, and its size which corresponded to the size of Cordoba at the time.
Work started on establishing the first mosque in Cordoba as soon as the Muslims entered the city in the year 93 Hijra or 711 CE as part of the campaign of Tariq bin Ziyad. It was near an old church in the city. When Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil established the Umayyad Emirate in Andalusia, he made Cordoba its capital in the year 138 Hijra or 756 CE. He set out to renovate the mosque and build a main mosque in its place when the city's population grew. He bought the nearby church and started rebuilding the main mosque in Cordoba according to new standards in the year 170 Hijra or 786 CE. The enclosed was around 5,000 square meters and the total area covered around 12,000 square meters.
The Mosque of Cordoba was the gift of Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil, the Hawk of Quraysh, to Andalusia. The mosque consisted of two sections. In the beginning, one section was for the Muslims, and the other section was for the Christians. When the number of Muslims increased, Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil promised the Christians to rebuild churches that were destroyed during the conquest of Andalusia, in exchange for dedicating the mosque entirely for use by Muslims.
His first undertaking was to rebuild the Mosque of Cordoba. This mosque was a beacon of the greatness of Umayyad rule in Andalusia. The Mosque of Cordoba went through four important phases. The first was during the era of the first ruler. The second phase was during the era of the second ruler. The third and fourth phases were during the era of Al-Mansur. Despite the great development of the mosque, it retained the initial character set by the first ruler who built the Mosque of Cordoba during the first stage. All the changes that took place consisted of moving the position of the niche from the small mosque of the first ruler to the mosque of Al-Mansur, which is the size we see today.
This mosque was a launching point for the Islamic conquerors. It produced legendary scholars such as Ibn Hazm and Al-Baji and Abu Mutrib al-Arabi and Ibn Rushd. Many scholars, worshippers, philosophers, and poets emerged from the Mosque of Cordoba.
Later on, the Mosque of Cordoba saw many expansions and additions until it covered an area of around 23,000 square meters.
All the Umayyad caliphs made additions to the mosque till it finally reached its current size, which we see today. It used to be far away from the Great Valley, but it spread until it became next to it.
The mosque is rectangular in shape. It has a vast interior with many hallways, the widest of which is the central hall which leads to the niche. The other half of the mosque, which doesn't have a ceiling, has maintained its elongated shape. The niche of this mosque is unique. It has a small chamber with 7 arches overhead supported by columns. Its walls are lined with boards of white marble, and on top there are slates decorated with mosaic and verses from the Quran. The ceiling of the niche is made out of a single piece of stone, which was built in the image of a decorated minaret. This distinctive type of niche is related to the unique acoustics of the Mosque of Cordoba, such that the Imam's voice can be heard throughout the mosque without the use of loudspeakers.
This mosque is amazing from a technical perspective, considering that those at the far end of the mosque hear the lecture as if they were in front of the sheikh. This is achieved through the columns and domes. The Muslim architect at the time used the properties of the columns and domes to make sure the sound could reach every last person in the mosque. Those standing at the back of the mosque could hear clearly as if they were directly in front of the sheikh. This was the ingenuity of the Muslim architect. Whenever there's an opportunity, he excels.
That's why we say that the Islamic civilization in Andalusia was far ahead of the Islamic civilization in the Middle East. They had the ability to build this mosque with such astonishing spatial dimensions. We can see the scale of the projects, and that they were employing the techniques necessary to create the interior space, with varying dimensions.
One of the technical innovations that was part of the mosque, which held the support of the roof and was part of the acoustic system, which was a top row of columns and arcs which supported the roof. This was a sensitive process from a technical perspective, but it yielded great results for the mosque. The arcs that are shaped like horseshoes contributed to this success. This type of arc was widespread in Andalusia and North Africa.
The innovation came with great attention to the structural elements. First, the invention of the pointed horseshoe arc. We know that the horseshoe arc is an Islamic invention. It didn't exist in any other civilizations before the Islamic one. It was an Andalusian invention in particular. The invention of this kind of arc is a structural achievement of the first degree. It points to the Andalusian architectural ambition of creating interior spaces which correspond to the horizontal interior dimensions. As the horizontal dimensions increase, you need the vertical dimension to correspond with the horizontal one. This was to achieve a sense of proportionality for the people using the space for prayer or study circles. The ambition to achieve greater heights, which create such a proportionality, led to the invention of the horseshoe arc and other such innovations.
There are other arcs that come in triplets, crossing and intertwined with alternating colours, on top of a forest of columns, which differ in colour depending on their source. Their arrangement was thought through carefully, so that they may point towards Mecca. There are a total of 1,300 columns, and the columns have different styles. The carvings, however, are similar.
Color is a very important element in the Mosque of Cordoba. There are different colored stones, including white, black, and red, and mixed color stones, which were used in different formations, resulting in a different visual language depending on where you are in the mosque relative to the position of the niche. You see the imam and the mosque through different lenses depending on your position and location within the mosque. It feels like there are different angles from which to observe the interior space of the Mosque of Cordoba. There is a chronological dimension which architects nowadays are trying to develop. It was present originally within the Mosque of Cordoba.
From the 15th century onwards, the mosque suffered from distortion and change. After the Castilians captured Cordoba, a royal chamber was constructed for church ceremonies, and a group of columns were destroyed. Strange statues and icons were brought into the mosque to convert it into a cathedral, and these changes distorted its general purpose.
Muslim architects, when it came to building mosques, tried to take the spatial characteristics present in Gothic churches and cathedrals and replicate them when building a mosque. However, they reassessed the measurements, making them more proportional. You feel like you are in the house of God, but you also feel that you are an important part of this space. You don't feel that the scale of your structure is beyond your comprehension. On the contrary, you feel part of the space with respect to its various dimensions. We cannot say that Islamic architecture was affected by pre-existing Gothic architecture. What we see is the opposite happening: Western architecture affected by Islamic architecture.
Nowadays, Muslims are forbidden from praying in the Mosque of Cordoba. People who want to pray there nowadays want to bring back those wonderful memories. They want to worship in this place again, but they are taken to prison. Where is the freedom of expression and the freedom to worship which the Europeans promised? Where is the freedom to practice your religion of choice? This is our mosque. We built it with our own resources. We allocated an enormous budget from the state budget. It was the greatest Islamic mosque to be built during that era. The greatest Islamic mosque, and it was built in Cordoba. Unfortunately, we, the owners of the mosque, are forbidden nowadays from worshipping there. This is a great mosque, and we hope that we will be allowed to pray there again, God willing.
The minaret was considered to be a well-crafted masterpiece when it was renovated by Abdul Rahman al-Nasser. The minaret was also distorted when the Spaniards converted it to a bell tower for the cathedral. Despite the changes that befell the Mosque of Cordoba, its original architecture and initial features overpower everything else. The beauty of the Islamic features leaves the greatest impression among the visitors. The Great Mosque of Cordoba remains the greatest Umayyad relic in Andalusia, representing an age of Islamic architectural and artistic maturity with regards to the planning and construction methodology, and with regards to the architectural and decorative elements.
The Mosque of Cordoba in particular represents the peak of Islamic architectural development in Andalusia. When considering Andalusia, there is a big difference between the advancements in architecture, science and the arts in Andalusia and the Islamic Maghreb, and the advancements in the Middle East. There were great advances in the Islamic West in terms of science and thought compared to the advancements in the East. The greatest such advancement was the Mosque of Cordoba.
The mosque is still regarded as a high point in the world's architectural achievements to this day. with regards to its great size, its splendor, and with regards to its distinctive artistic creativity.
Just a few kilometers from Cordoba, we find the remains of a city which was established by the Umayyad Caliph Abdul Rahman III to be the center of his rule. He spent a great fortune to build it, and many have described its splendor and beauty. This is the city of Az-Zahra. It was completed in 1335 Hijra or 1947 CE. It was home to a group of palaces, ruling headquarters, markets and gardens. However, the city didn't last very long. "65 years after it was first inhabited, it was stormed by an angry mob which looted and destroyed it and set fire to it. The place was then lost to history." In the beginning of the 20th century CE, archaeological expeditions started excavating the city, and gradually many of the landmarks were uncovered, including some of its palaces. Most recently, the remains of a mosque were uncovered in Az-Zahra. It's 25 meters long and 18 meters wide. It consists of a central hall, 3 side halls and a ribbed niche. There are remains of a minaret on the southern side. And this archaeological discovery was made in the year 2007. Our last stop in our quest to find the Mosques of Andalusia will be in the city of Granada, a city that was fated to be the last Andalusian city to fall in the hands of the Latin kingdoms. Many of Granada's archaeology is well preserved, most notably Alhambra Palace, which is one of the most famous historical and architectural landmarks in Europe and one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, considering its level of architectural mastery and its unrivaled grandeur. However, our destination in this city was not originally the Alhambra Palace. We came for the Mosques of Granada that are mentioned in the history books, including its main mosque, which was known as the Almoravids Mosque. It was located next to the Alhambra Palace. We were, however, greatly disappointed. Within the city limits next to Alhambra Palace, nothing has remained of this mosque. It is said that the tower of the San Jose Church in the city is a remnant of the minaret of the Almoravids Mosque. And so, all of Granada's mosques were destroyed, and so was all the evidence that pointed to their existence. On the other hand, its castle was preserved and renovated, and is now a great source of touristic income.
There were plenty of mosques there, just as there were churches. Unfortunately, these mosques came under attack after the Muslims were expelled from the city and left Granada in the 10th century CE. This happened all over Andalusia, unfortunately, to the Alhambra Palace, Alcazar, Az-Zahra in Cordoba, which was built in the age of Abdul Rahman and Nasr al-Din, one of the most powerful rulers of the world. All this has changed, unfortunately, and is no longer as it used to be.
Granada was captured by the kingdoms of Castile and Leon in the year 897 Hijra, or 1491 CE, after a difficult siege. The fall of the city spelled the end of the Islamic presence in Andalusia. A difficult period of Inquisition courts and forceful conversions to Christianity had begun, and the wars of extermination that targeted the remainder of the Muslims. The mosques were not spared from these campaigns. Most of them were destroyed or their features distorted. The lack of evidence of any mosques in Granada is living proof of the Inquisition's results.